Frieren Beyond Journey's End is one of the most well-written and thought-provoking pieces of media to be released within recent years. It exemplifies the best qualities of slice of life, action-adventure, and character drama with intricate world-building, beautiful scenery, and a calm, confident delivery of its themes. The story focuses on a small group of adventurers as they retrace the steps of the hero's party who defeated the Demon King 80 years prior. It is beyond the journey's end because all of the most important events have realistically already happened. The Demon King has been slain, and the world has known relative peace since its passing. That doesn't mean there's little to do, but grandiose adventures or dreams of becoming a hero have relatively deflated since then. But in it, a new focus on the growth and flourishing of humanity. Throughout this next journey, Frieren, the titular character, is in many ways tested and forced to grow, but not in ways that one would typically expect. Should the first journey have been one of strength and necessity, the second becomes one of self-actualization and introspection. As the progressions of both journeys are revealed, so too are the lines that distinguish the motives of each journey blurred, while ever clearer is the claim that a life well lived is one surrounded by passion and connection. But for a show so concerned with growth and compassion, there is a standout quality that hasn't changed in all the hundreds of years the series spans, that being the conflict with demons. Demons are very commonly used as a universal evil in stories. It's easy to leave them as some kind of unidentified villains that the audience and characters understand as wholly and entirely corrupt, with no possibility of redemption, just as you might see in horror movies like the Conjuring series, where demon is enough of a classification of evil to not bother thinking much deeper. Frieren utilizes this idea, but expands on it with much more nuance. In this world, they are specifically man-eating beasts, and further defined as monsters capable of speech, classifying demons as a subcategory of monster, but specifically any monster that can speak. They don't speak in the same fashion that parrots would, simply mimicking words, as they do have some level of deeper thought and understanding about the meanings of words. But they are nonetheless tools for deception, as is indicated when Frieren claims they're descended from monsters who cried help from the shadows to lure humans. And that for demons as they are now, words are a means of deceiving humans. This gives demons a much greater foundation to stand on when comprehending their evil, as Frieren directly meets with the standard interpretation and attempts to tear down any sympathy that might remain within the cracks of such brevity. These are, nonetheless, words straight out of Frieren's mouth, and while we have come to trust her word up to this point, we also understand that she could be unreliable and, like she is with many other usually normal things, possibly incorrect. To back up Frieren's claim, there is a paired anecdotal example, with a flashback to a time where Himmel let a demon child live. Himmel's reasoning, alongside the village chief, is that it's only a child, and thus they allow it to live among them. Frieren advises against this, but allows Himmel to do as he pleases. When the demon child wins him over with pleas of pain and missing their mother, he spares it on the grounds of being capable of speech with each other. Eventually, Frieren is proven right, as the demon goes on to kill the village leader that saved it, and presents the leader's daughter as a replacement for the one she ate, as a shocking display of completely misunderstanding family, the value of life, and other qualities of human emotion and empathy. This presents one of the most important things to understand about demons and their relation to humanity on a thematic level. Everything that demons seem to be lacking is precisely what makes us most human. Himmel's immense regret and new understanding of demons causes him to, this time, not stop Frieren from killing it. And as the demon dies, it once again tries to call out for its mother. Frieren points out the hypocrisy and also reveals some new information, saying that, like monsters, demons don't raise their young, and that they have no concept of family, effectively comparing them to monsters as they exist within the world, not allowing the distinguishing characteristic of speech to hold any weight, and for a realistic example, below even animals as we would typically understand them. This demon child, very politely decides to tell Frieren that they use the word mom because it stops you from killing us, further hammering home the insinuation that words, for demons, are only used to deceive their prey. They don't even understand the emotions attached to the word, but merely that using it stops humans for a moment, just as it did with Himmel in the previous scene. This scene is paralleled with the encounter between Lugner and Graf, where Graf is eventually dissuaded out of killing the demons by Lugner's similar words of family, and what would have been a powerful demonstration of how war affects families on both sides. That would be if it were true, as Lugner is simply lying, which is reinforced and again paralleled to the anecdote when Linny asks Lugner, "What is a father?" To which Lugner responds, "Who knows?" Through moments like these, the show establishes demons as a much more understandable, but not in any way relatable, evil, as it paints them incapable of emotion, equates them to any other basic monster, and puts them below even animals, providing multiple examples to trust this interpretation, whether it's Frieren's words back in the prison, the flashback to the situation with Himmel in the village, or now, in current times, with Lugner and Graf. Another thing of note, but by establishing Himmel as an undeniably pure and always good hero, not necessarily always right, but always pure of heart and best intentioned, by establishing Himmel like this prior, any future usage of him, and anything he condemns, can be interpreted as wholeheartedly evil in the context of the show. We maybe can't trust Frieren's judgment of human emotions and empathy, but we certainly can trust Himmel. And we, the viewers, know they must be truly evil for such a beacon of good to be killing them. This is essentially the main aim of episode 7 for the show, to classify and further expand on what demons are and their place within the world. We, the audience, no longer question whether demons are deserving of sympathy, not as ragged animals trying their best to survive, or as sentient, thinking creatures deserving of respect on the same level of humans. They are lying, deceptive predators, morally below even the most basic notions of empathy that you would plainly expect from even a dog. While some look quite monstrous, most demons are undeniably human-ish in appearance. They dress themselves in armor and clothes, wield magic, and are exceptionally proud, which would typically indicate a greater level of thought and perhaps even various social structures within their communities. However, these workings are also refuted and determined to be utterly base in nature. Flamme demonstrates the demon's pride in a very long ago encounter when Flamme and Frieren first met. Flamme claiming, "They had every intention of catching us off guard by concealing their mana until just before they struck. But the moment they realized we were mages, they stepped out into the open." And that every last one of them has a ridiculous sense of pride when it comes to magic. This pride is ultimately what allows Flamme to exploit them, killing them immediately. Flamme, Frieren, and now Fern all conceal their mana so as to deceive demons into thinking that they're weak. This is how Fern defeats Lugner, how Frieren defeats Aura, and how Flamme defeats these demons right here. Their pride is incredibly foul, as it is overwhelmingly a notion of oppression and an attempt to rule by strength, which is also why they are so disgusted by these three mages for concealing their mana, Lugner calling Fern a disgrace to all mages. This also then becomes the nature of their hierarchies, determined purely by strength against one another, which Flamme reveals when telling Frieren, demons are individualist, but they form the barest connections needed to fight against humankind, indicating even more so that their grouping is only done so that they might kill more humans, nothing related to family or emotion. But Flamme continues, they haven't changed a bit since they were monsters. Might makes right, and that they'd never grant any dignity to those with little mana. So the stronger they are, the more desperate they are to show off their mana. Even in the simple and fragile connections they have between each other, even those are rooted in undeniably negative qualities. Their hierarchies are built off of strength, and any aspect about them that might be perceived as society is only a charade so as to more effectively kill humans and flaunt their own pride. Whether it be the origin of their language, the nature of their appearance, or the prey they exclusively hunt, demons are definitively evil, through and through. In an ever-expanding compendium of stories who try hard to allow their villains moments where they might be understood, the simpler and honestly probably easier option is what Frieren presents. Yet Frieren also demonstrates the efficacy of such an approach. Even when monsters are created to be evil, there is typically some capacity within their construction that allows them sympathy, understanding, relatability, or at least pity. But for this series, nothing of the sort is allowed. There is no sympathizing with demons in Frieren. In similar, but not the same constitution to the demons of Frieren, are the orcs of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The orcs are an incredibly interesting perspective for a kind of evil creature. Like the demons of Frieren, the orcs are repeatedly intended to be personifications or implements of evil. and rarely are there moments of sympathy to be directed towards them. The orcs kill and eat the other sentient races, evidenced when the Uruk-hai announce, "We are the servants of Saruman the Wise, the White Hand, the hand that gives us man's flesh to eat." The orcs are prejudiced against one another, forming factions or tribes that they use to alienate, demean, or distance themselves from other groups of orcs, such as that same Uruk-hai orc, Ugluk, saying, "I don't trust you, little swine. You've got no guts outside your own sties." They also base their hierarchies off of power, the larger and the stronger maintaining control, while the weaker are forced to submit. Seen again in this same scene where, without warning, Ugluk sprang forwards, and with 2 swift strokes swept the heads off of 2 of his opponents. And then moments later, some of the Northerners were still unwilling, and the Isengarders slew 2 more before the rest cowed. This prejudice and tribalism causes orcs to be frequently insubordinate, and infighting occurs often. They have no problem killing each other, hating each other, and have no sympathy towards each other. However, they do band together, just as demons might in Frieren, so that they can direct a greater hatred towards the other races of the world. Frodo states it best when he says, "They hate us far more, all together and all the time. If those 2 had seen us, they would have dropped all their quarrel until we were dead," demonstrating that hatred is unfortunately inherent within orcs. Against each other, yes, but even more so towards all others. Although, there can still be pity attributed to orcs. The strong ruling inherently means the weak are ruled, and under Sauron's army, many times are orcs referred to as slaves, and at the destruction of the ring, the wavering of Sauron's power, the orcs flee scattered and leaderless, and abandon their fight, concerned with little more than saving their own skin. And while the power hierarchies are assembled in similar ways between orcs and demons, infighting, cannibalism, which is only present in the movie adaptation, or any manner of oppression present among orcs, doesn't seem to be present amongst demons, as even the weak might be used some way, like in the fight with the demon Revolte, who does indeed attack the young demon girl, but only in an effort to lead Ganao into a trap, where she, weak and otherwise useless as she is able to stab him, betraying his empathy and compassion with a near-fatal blow. Orcs, then, through this prejudiced oppression, become much more pitiable than the demons of Frieren. And while Tolkien tries very hard to paint orcs as an evil-first kind of creature, it becomes difficult as a reader to be entirely convinced of that. Orcs have their own languages, they converse and organize to a much greater scale than demons, they do have social allegiances and form bonds between each other, fragile as they might be, and they comprehend enough to fight under the banner of an entirely separate organization. They are the blank tools of Sauron's army, and true evil of the story is not particularly any individual, as even above Sauron there is Morgoth. But evil within the Lord of the Rings is much more so a concept inherent to the world rather than any kind of incarnation as it might be seen within the plot of the books. If you're looking for evil incarnate, Morgoth would be your best bet, and he has no appearance within the trilogy. So evil then becomes associated with Sauron, orcs, and what have you, but it is not conclusively and entirely personified by any or even all of them. And because of that, orcs, while instruments of evil, are not evil itself. This is the key difference between how orcs are to be understood, and how the demons of Frieren are to be understood. For Frieren, demons and evil are one and the same. The complete lack of human qualities and the utterly base existence the demons perpetuate sets them apart from the orcs, who, in a few different instances within the books, can be pitied under the right lighting. Both demons and orcs are inherently evil in their construction and undeserving of pity, but demons are evil as it exists within the world, and orcs are merely evil's slaves. Let's step out of the storytelling perspective and think of demons more so as animals rather than some grand incarnation of evil. Here, there are other bases of which an animal might have value besides strictly their effect on humans. Almost all animals actively engage with their surrounding ecosystems, some in negative ways and some in positive ways, and for their contributions they might be said to be more or less valuable as they contribute to the world around them. The most important are often referred to as keystone species, and of them there are a few different varieties, such as ecosystem engineers, like beavers, who actively alter the landscape, creating wetlands, causing or preventing floods, and overall vastly contributing to biodiversity in their areas, or apex predators, such as gray wolves, who control the populations of elk or deer to prevent overgrazing and overconsumption of plant life. Looking at the demons of Frieren from an ecological standpoint, they still failed tremendously to make any case for their continued survival, and ultimately, the bar for when we humans decide an animal worthy of eradicating is far below where demons are standing. To speak simply, if demons were animals as we understand them in the real world, we would have probably killed them all. While what I'm about to say is a way oversimplified explanation of the roles of animals, generally they can be seen as either producers, consumers, or decomposers. These titles are referred to as the trophic level of an animal, and is most concisely explained by Raymond L. Lindeman in his paper The Trophic-Dynamic Aspect of Ecology, where the labels were first identified. He explains, the basic process in trophic dynamics is the transfer of energy from one part of the ecosystem to another. All function, and indeed all life within an ecosystem, depends upon the utilization of an external source of energy, solar radiation. Where he is basically saying that these labels are in reference to the animal's respective interaction with energy. Producers utilize energy from the sun, who are then eaten by consumers who regulate and control the populations of various producer species. And in most ecosystems, these consumers are themselves then consumed by predators, and so on, and all animals or plants are then eventually eaten by decomposers, who, without going into too much detail, effectively clean up their ecosystems by removing waste and turning it back into usable materials. This concept is by no means entirely comprehensive in understanding the roles and functions of animals, like the beavers we mentioned earlier, who perform important duties to their ecosystems outside of the transfer of energy. But the trophic system is absolutely necessary to every and any ecosystem. But this system is built upon the energy transfers of solar radiation. And while this happens in Frieren, there is another confounding factor, that being mana and magic. All monsters within Frieren are composed of mana, demons included, and the functions and applicability of an ecosystem centered around the flow of mana is largely not understood or explained within the story. That complicates things, as there are possibly some effects that demons have on their mana ecosystems that we don't and can't understand. But remember, this doesn't mean they are exempt from the standard solar-based systems either. If we can trust the word of that village chief in episode 7, he claims, it's not as though they need to eat humans to survive, right? So it is unclear exactly why demons would hunt humans, and while perhaps mana has something to do with it, it is never explicitly stated that demons get specifically stronger by killing more people. Although it is insinuated that older demons tend to be stronger, perhaps because they've consumed more humans. This is demonstrated through the emphasis put on Aura the Guillotine being alive for over 500 years, but then is also called into question when Frieren retorts that she is a mage who's been alive for over 1,000. And it is more likely just that they've had more time to develop their magic, or simply that weak demons would never have lived long anyways, and not because of a demon-specific strength based directly on the number of humans eaten, like how the demons within Demon Slayer operate. Because there is so little information surrounding what a mana ecosystem might look like, we can't say for sure what value a demon or monster would have within it. We don't know how monsters are born, if they are born at all, but we do know that when they die, they dissipate into mana, possibly dispersing into the surrounding ecosystem and effectively recycling whatever mana they were holding on to. This idea is possible, however demons also cast and channel mana just as humans might, and so possibly it is through this flow that demons might contribute to a mana ecosystem. While they are most certainly consumers in a standard solar-based ecosystem, from this perspective of channeling and redistributing mana, perhaps they would be the producers in this mana-based system. I'm going to stop here, as it is already getting into heavy speculation about the origin, function, or value of mana as an independent source of energy, if it even can be compared as such. But from these basic conclusions, there could be an argument made about the value of demons within a hypothetical mana-based ecosystem. This is a very possible point in favor of demons, but it also relies on a lot of assumptions, and just as easily could be dismantled by even a single piece of counter-evidence about the function of mana. And who knows, while I have framed this under an entirely separate origin of energy, mana could also be derived from the sun just as easily. The show does not explain in such detail, and admittedly it would probably be strange if it tried to. Seeing how we can't draw any conclusions about a hypothetical mana-based ecosystem, we are left with the, thankfully much easier to place, solar radiation-based system that we have on Earth. In these regards, demons are substantially less useful. Demons would be consumers within this system, as they take on a predator role in hunting humans, and while we know they can sustain without eating humans, it is unknown if that includes eating other foods or if they have to eat at all to sustain themselves. Because of this, they effectively either don't contribute to the energy loop by not consuming anything and not releasing anything when they die either, or they exclusively feed on humans, which runs into much more complicated issues concerning human impact on ecosystems, where the only value that demons add to an ecosystem would be the effects caused by killing humans. And obviously, that isn't really an option that humans would reasonably consider. So there is little to no evidence in support of a hypothetical mana-based system, and little indication that demons would provide any value to the standard solar-based ecosystem. While that alone is not nearly enough to warrant a creature's destruction, the fact that the sole predation habit of demons is on humans, and that demons are repeatedly demonstrated to be capable of widespread destruction, in the inverse then, there are not nearly enough reasons to warrant keeping them alive. Furthermore, there are real-world examples where humans have acted exactly in this way, trying to eliminate other species to prevent the destruction of their own. And very tragically, many cases of humans not even needing that extreme of a reason before they began slaughtering animals. Bison, otters, beavers, grizzly bears, and gray wolves, just in North America, are easy examples of animals that were nearly or entirely wiped out by human overreach. For many of them, threatening human life directly wasn't even a significant reason, such as bison, who were nearly eradicated primarily for profit and to dismantle native tribes' ways of life, or otters and beavers, who were extremely overhunted for the making and selling of their pelts. One example, the gray wolf, is more closely aligned to what we're looking at, as they were at least hunted and killed in an effort to preserve human life. Wolves very rarely, if ever, directly attacked humans like demons do, but they instead competed directly for food with humans, like deer or elk, or devastated attempts to raise livestock, which, especially during harsh winters, could make or break surviving through back to spring. Because of the indirect threat posed to humans, there were multiple historical attempts to eliminate as many as possible. Going all the way back to 1630 and likely even further, there are records of wolf bounties, where European settlers were rewarded for specifically killing wolves. This attitude towards wolves continued for a very long time with varying levels of intensity, such as in 1913, where a fine could be levied against someone who willingly freed a wolf from a trap, or in 1915, when the US government officially began hunting gray wolves, where 24,132 gray wolves were killed by 1942. It wasn't until around this time that attitudes towards gray wolves began to slowly shift towards preservation instead of extermination. And it is very easy to see why, as the effects of our own devastation became much more evident, and wolves really did not pose any kind of threat to humans anymore. They likely hadn't for quite some time. The government was anything if not effective at culling their population, and so many different advances in technology, agriculture, infrastructure, and much more basically removed any kind of threat wolves might have posed towards humans centuries prior. Losing your livestock was devastating to the bank accounts of Americans in the 1960s, but it wouldn't really mean starving to death. Considering how humanity reacted to the comparably minor damage caused by gray wolves, in the context of the story, obviously the real people who died due to gray wolves are infinitely more valuable than any kind of fictional creature. The extreme devastation caused by groups of demons would be more than enough to warrant hunting them. In fact, in many instances, humanity seems to be on the back foot, calling most conflicts with demons full-on wars, a war both sides obviously would want to win. The only possible coexistence with demons, on the basis of the coexistence with gray wolves we now have, would be one where the demons' threat to humanity has been so minimized that exterminating them no longer serves any purpose. But maybe wolves are too old of an example. A lot of progress has been made in trying, actually, to preserve many species of animals in the recent century, gray wolves included. And the moral values of a century ago, and especially 4 centuries ago, really do not reflect modern sentiment. Yet there is one pressing example of intentionally destroyed species that may possibly arrive in the near future. And if we're talking threat to human lives, then there is no better example than the currently hot topic of mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are the world's most dangerous animal, spreading multiple very dangerous diseases that kill hundreds of thousands each year. The Debug Project, in very simplified wording, is an initiative funded by Google with the aim of introducing millions of sterile male mosquitoes to hopefully, eventually, drastically reduce the populations. Very importantly, as is reported in a Guardian article covering the subject, the initiative is targeted specifically at one species of mosquito, Aedes aegypti, which are distinct from other species as they are highly domesticated and feed mainly on humans, and are also responsible for spreading many life-threatening diseases such as dengue, Zika, chikungunya, and yellow fever. A 2021 report by Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS, finds, after an extensive controlled experiment within Australia, that regular releases of Aedes aegypti males infected with A. wolbachia was shown to drive strong population suppression in mosaic populations of wild-type and Wolbachia carrying Aedes aegypti, and also that one season's suppression experiment can also show an ongoing effect into the following season. Basically, the infected male mosquitoes are made incompatible mating partners by the disease, causing eggs laid by biting, disease-spreading females to never hatch, which then reduces populations of Aedes aegypti mosquitoes for the current and future seasons, proving this method as an effective long-term mosquito suppressant. Obviously, this is a difficult and careful decision regardless of how irritating and dangerous mosquitoes are. And because of this, the Debug Project is aimed specifically at only a very harmful species of mosquito, leaving others untouched, while also noting that due to the invasive nature of Aedes aegypti, ecological impact of removing them from urban areas should be minimal. Assuming this research and practice proves effective at a larger scale, the Debug Project claims they hope to apply our approach to other insects in the future, including other species of mosquitoes, such as various species of the Anopheles genus, which are responsible for spreading malaria. Basically, if it would save human lives, and it almost certainly would, then it is worth fighting for. To anyone who has watched the show, this next section is probably a complete no-brainer, but it is important to be said nonetheless, and has already been discussed intermittently throughout this piece. But demons are incredibly dangerous within the world of Frieren, and if human historical response to grey wolves back then, or Aedes aegypti mosquitoes today is anything to go off of, then demons, for all the harm they cause, would absolutely be a priority target. For starters, many of the characters we've met throughout the story have had their lives completely upended by demons. Frieren, Eisen, and Stark were all made orphans by demons. Countless lives are lost from soldiers fighting against demons, such as Graf Granit's son and Lord Orden's son, and the countless puppeted soldiers under Aura's undead legion. Frieren's village was wiped out by demons and her own life nearly taken, only surviving a moment's later encounter with more, even stronger demons because of Flamme's protection, who also had her parents killed by demons. Considering that Flamme lived over 1,000 years before Stark and Fern, and any of the other modern characters, this demonstrates that demons have been a significant threat to humanity for a very, very long time at this point. In fact, the entire race of elves is nearly wiped out by demons, with those same demons we see Flamme kill claiming that their orders were to kill all the elves. This is reinforced by conversations that Frieren and Kraft have, two surviving elves, discussing the extermination of their species. It is incredibly rare to ever see an elf, with both of them noting it has been a very, very long time since either of them have encountered another of their kind, hinting at the effectiveness of demonkind's effort in this regard. Demons also cause significant structural damage. Disease, while incredibly life-threatening, does not damage supply lines, burn down villages, block off roads, and take over territory, or stage large-scale attacks against nations of the world. Again, I want to make it very clear, obviously real-world disease is significantly more damaging than any kind of fictional threat will ever be. Real human lives are endlessly more valuable than fictional empires, but I frame it in this way to demonstrate that, should demons be evaluated under our real-world lens, they would certainly be a more potent threat than even the most dangerous animal that exists here on Earth. Demons threaten lives directly, threaten entire species of humanoid peoples, create long-lasting environmental and infrastructural damage, threaten lives indirectly through damaging supply lines and making trade more difficult, and keeping the world in an eternal state of war-related despair, death, and desperation. Demons copy humanity the best they can only to deceive and prey upon them, making mockeries of compassion, empathy, community, and it can be said that every feature of humanity that demons are lacking are precisely what makes humans so special. Under this notion of relatability and redemption, demons are completely void and do not deserve any kind of reciprocal compassion or pity. Compared to Lord of the Rings orcs, who are instruments of evil all throughout the series, the orcs are at least pitiable, and a world beyond their destruction exists and is reflected upon throughout the series, which is not the case for demons. In this juxtaposition, demons are even worse than one of the most recognizably evil creatures throughout all of fiction. Considering the potential of demons as an active contributor to ecosystems, even giving them the favor of a potential mana-based ecosystem, they fail in nearly every regard and prove themselves more akin to invasive species who damage ecosystems much more than they contribute to them, compared to historical precedent, with instances such as grey wolves and other unfortunate animals throughout history. With how willing and eager we were to attempt to exterminate those animals, demons would trump all of them in priority. And even under modern sentiment towards population control of dangerous animals, such as the debug project towards mosquitoes, demons even then would prove more destructive and a greater threat to human lives and society than mosquitoes ever could. In basically every conceivable notion, demons are utterly and entirely a blight upon the world of Frieren. But where do we go from here? There's likely few people, if any, who would actually claim otherwise, to argue for their continued existence in a world they've only made worse. And whether you analyze the series thoroughly, or have just consumed its themes passively, the conclusion one reaches is largely the same. Demons are evil, they are the enemies within the series, and for the heroes, for humanity to succeed, they have to eradicate this threat and slay the Demon King. But demonkind does more than just show off what makes humans special by observing what demons lack. They go further to instead personify the evils that lie within humans themselves. The author has extracted the evils of humanity and placed them within the vessel of demons, leaving humanoids in the series to serve as the containers for the remaining good, clashing demons against humans and evil against good. If demons are mocking humanity, then what qualities are they actually mocking? Where are humans and demons, regrettably, aligned? Something I neglected to mention earlier, but in reality, the most dangerous animal is not the mosquito. The most dangerous animal is actually humans. Just as demons do, we kill each other not just to survive, not to fill our bellies, but out of pride, out of anger, out of hatred, or out of fear. In Season 2, Episode 2, the group encounters the Sword Demon, who claims, "I killed them so I could eat them. I had to in order to survive," which Frieren contests, "Even though you can eat things other than humans?" And the demon responds once more, "Why is that a reason not to eat humans?" While this moment is obviously reflective of how demons see humans as cattle, it goes further to symbolize how humans interact with cattle. I don't mean to be overly preachy, but humans don't have to eat animals to survive. Not only are we more than capable of eating plants for the majority of our sustenance, but technology has evolved enough to where nutrients that we would have been missing from animals can be acquired through other means besides killing and eating them. In this regard, we might not be as dissimilar from demons as we would hope ourselves to be. In the next episode, Frieren speaks with the head of the Norm Company, who tells her, "We've lost a third of our armed caravans and army fighting demons. If the Norm Company were a nation, we'd have fallen already." This might sound like a strange argument to make, but what really is the word demon doing in this claim? It identifies the group and criticizes their destruction, but would it be any less surprising if it said humans instead? In the context of the show, perhaps, but in a different show, in a different reality, if this was real life, what other word could possibly fill that gap? In reality, only humans are capable of being as destructive as demons are shown to be. In episode 18 of Season 1, Kraft the Monk encounters a soon-to-be first-class mage, Ubel. She's dealing with some bandits, so Kraft steps in and, after defeating them, causes them to flee. Ubel thanks him for saving her, but he responds, "I didn't rescue you," finishing their discussion with the claim, "I was simply saving the lives I saw in front of me." Kraft correctly assumes that Ubel was the cause of the bodies he'd found earlier, and also correctly assumes that Ubel wouldn't have hesitated to kill these bandits either. The lives he saved were theirs, not Ubel's. She's a nuanced character, but she's also undeniably cruel and has been demonstrated to kill without much thought. In this way, she's probably worse than most demons we've seen from a moral standpoint, as Ubel does understand the value of life, does understand human emotions, and yet doesn't care. It is also true that Ubel is a fairly unique case, but even so, she does exist and she is human, just as those bandits were, and just as the armies of the southern nation are. The same conflicts that orphaned Fern and left her for dead. The evils that demons are born from are regrettably human in origin. They are intelligent, cruel, tactical, and painful, and they all come from us. But besides a few outliers, like Ubel, the bandits, human-on-human wars, and a few other instances, these evils are largely contained within demonkind. It is not humans who are the most persistent and prominent perpetrators within the series. It is still demons, regardless of where those evils come from. By separating humanity into two vessels, the humanoids like elves, dwarves, and man, who hold the virtuous qualities, and the demons who contain the villainy, the emotionless, deceptive, and unnecessary killing, the show can contrast them and show off just how wonderful the virtuous humans are. Demons have already been deconstructed enough. There's 18 pages of that behind this statement. So let's finally discuss the true meaning behind Frieren beyond Journey's End. If anyone is to represent the good of humanity within the series, then there is no one better than Himmel the hero. Viewers are shown countless instances of his powerful morals, yet each moment stands out regardless. One moment in episode 2 of season 2, however, puts it best. After defeating the sword demon in the modern timeline, a flashback plays of when the hero's party defeated a different but similar sword demon. Frieren complains, "This was an awful job," to which Himmel responds, "Sometimes difficult jobs, like these, ultimately help lots of people. That's why I never abandon someone in need." The framing of this scene is incredibly powerful, despite the simplicity of what is actually being said. The party has just defeated a demon, clashing the values of humanity against demonkind, and proving humanity to triumph. After such a triumph, Himmel reinforces exactly what values have prevailed here. That while the demon fought to kill people, to show off its strength, Himmel fought instead to save people. Even in an awful job, Himmel goes out of his way to endure it, to help people, because humanity is worth it. It's a great moment that very effectively uses the symbolic value of demons to highlight humanity's good qualities. But even still, this moment is not particularly unique, as nearly every fight with demons becomes a kind of moral battle between the virtuous humanity and the villainous demonkind. Take, for instance, the battle with Qual, who spent his entire life pursuing a killing magic, only to be made completely obsolete by the efforts of humanity before the turn of the century, showing that pursuing life bears much more fruit than pursuing death does. Or the fight with Aura, whose pride is fully represented by the nature of her spell, pitting herself directly against her opponent, not in any battle of skill, but in one of raw strength. Whoever has more mana wins. Naturally, Frieren defeats her easily, demonstrating that true strength doesn't come in prideful gloating, but in quiet humility. Side note, before, Frieren was apparently very flashy with her magic, and even with the rest of the party at her side, Aura managed to escape them. The much less flashy and much more humble Frieren that we see now, this time, defeats Aura and her legion entirely by herself. Let's look at one other moment a little deeper though, this being the fight with the Divine Revolte in Season 2. Throughout the fight between Stark and Genau against Revolte, there are many things of note, but most important is the notion of being a good person. Genau and Stark, through their discussions, question whether being a good person is a disadvantage for a soldier. Genau calls Stark a good person, and is firmly of the opinion that good people tend not to live long. And Stark, while not disagreeing necessarily, makes the claim that, "You seem like a good person to me, too." Stark states that he couldn't defend a village like Genau, demonstrating how Stark doesn't see himself as a good person either. Even though he quite literally is defending a village right now. But anyways, Genau refutes Stark's claim by saying, "I'm not a good person, quite the opposite." Reflecting on his misdeeds, how he's killed and forsaken many people. capping it off by saying he doesn't feel even slightly sad seeing his hometown destroyed and slaughtered. But Genau is a good person, and so is Stark. They are both correct, even though neither can see it for themselves. This is proved within the fight in two separate moments. First, when Stark takes a blow to give Genau an opening. Stark takes Revolte's attack head-on, getting hit when his guard is broken, but in doing so, holds Revolte down enough to allow Genau a moment to critically wound him, cutting off his tail and slashing at his abdomen. Stark here demonstrates that he would sacrifice himself for the greater good, that for as cowardly as he claims to be, he is brave enough to jump right in front of a potentially fatal attack should it mean protecting his ally and defeating his enemy. Stark is humble, and he is a good person. Second, for Genau, proof of his good nature is demonstrated when he gives up the incredible advantage they had over Revolte from Stark's sacrifice, so as to protect a child. Revolte throws a sword at the child, and without giving it any thought, Genau leaps to her defense and she stabs him in the stomach as the disguise burns off and the small pink-haired demon girl is revealed. Genau even claims, "I only ever knew one idiot who died protecting a child he didn't know," referencing his former partner. But even in this insult, Genau here is about to die, protecting a child he didn't know. His instincts pointed him to protection, even when his rational thought would have told him that there was no possible way a human girl could still be alive within the village. Because Genau is a good person too. Revolte used his ally as a tool, intentionally putting her in danger so that he might get an advantage, whereas Stark and Genau put themselves in danger, even if it meant giving up their advantage. Despite the wounds they suffered, despite their insecurity, despite the captain of the station's soldiers being far stronger than Stark, despite the fact that kind mages don't live long, the two of them do prevail, defeating Revolte, and proving that protecting the innocent, sacrificing oneself for the greater good, trusting your allies, being humble, being good, and being kind, can still win out against the proud, the evil, and the cruel. Ultimately, Frieren is much more about exploring these themes than trying desperately to cling to action sequences and power fantasies. Yet Demons, when written in this way, allows the series to accomplish both. We never see demons sharing meals with the people they care about. We never see demons crying over loss and grief. We never see demons swallowing their pride or practicing self-reflection. It is only by writing demons this particular way, to wrap them up in every evil of humanity, everything else in the series, all the beautiful and good qualities within humanity, shine only brighter. I don't think Frieren's demons deserve to live. They're cruel, mindless, deceptive predators who are utterly worthless within the world they inhabit. But for the story they create, they are one of the most valuable aspects of the series. That by being so consumed with pride, disgust, murder, and lust for power and presence, they show how weak those ideals are. And humanity, when demonstrating humility, charity, and kindness, those qualities are shown to be stronger than anything else.